Welcome back everyone to another video on the Vixen Victory channel. Today we're going to continue our series going over build tips and guides for different characters that have come out in terms of when the recency was for each character. Now we talked about Claron, Sethos, Arlecchino, and Chiori, and we are going backwards in time, now all the way to Chiori, finally talking about her. Now the last video was talking about Arlecchino, so here talking about the tailor in Inazuma. Looking at this character, she has a lot of great things kind of going on with her, and she's usually talked about and used with mainly two major teams, either a full mono geo team with Ito, and an actual kind of interesting team with a crystallized team with Navia. Now, a lot of things can be said about Chiori, and a lot of people necessarily when she first came out were talking a lot of big hype about her, and a lot of people were not very happy with her because maybe she didn't work perfectly like how they wanted her to in certain instances. But she is a great character, and I think if you have her, she's going to be a good character and a solid one to have, especially if you have another Geo DPS that you're using with her. Looking right and first and foremost, like we normally do with how this character is going to work, let's jump over into her skill, which is what you're mainly going to be using to actually use her most of the time. So when you use her skill, she's going to dash to a certain extent. There is a hold and a press version. And when you use your skill, you're going to dash in a certain direction. If you hold it, you can aim where you're going to go. But if you just tap, it'll go to the closest enemy possible to you. And Chiori will summon the automaton doll Tomoto, which will go beside her and will do an AoE geo damage attacks to nearby opponents based on her attack and her defense. So she is a dual scaler, not a split scaler. She will be going off of her damage both off of attack percent and defense percent. So whatever your attack and defense stats are, you're going to want to go into both of these for these. Now, alongside of this, while using this skill, basically constantly Tomoto will be doing constant attacks, but just keep in mind that the duration is 17 seconds of the doll being off field, as well as when you switch, Tomoto will stay on field for the entire 17-second duration, even if you switch to a different character. And just keep in mind that this is only every 3.6 seconds does the automaton doll actually attack, so you can get a good 4 to 5 different hits out of this actual talent. While the doll is active, if there are nearby geo constructs as well out, like Ushi from Ito or Zhongli's Pillar, if there's at least one other one nearby, there will be another additional Tomoto that will be summoned next to your active character. And then only one additional Tomoto can be summoned in this manner, and basically you can have only two basically on field at one time. Now, its duration is counted separately from the other automaton doll that you originally create when you first use a skill, so it's not immediately only staying to that first doll's duration of 17 seconds. Both of them can have their different durations of 17 seconds as well, which means you can maximize their amount of damage they can output. Talking about maximizing their damage for output, looking at actually how to use the skill as well once you use it. Now, the first passive talent that she gains, she will gain different effects depending on the next action that you take after using her skill. So if you press the skill again, so 2 times in a row, you will trigger the tapestry effect, and if you press a normal attack after using the skill, you will get the tailoring effect. Now the tapestry effect is, in my personal opinion, what you're going to want more, just because a lot of the times people are going to be putting Chiori off field, and I think this is the best for her, especially for the teams that she's used in. Now by using your skill twice, you will then switch automatically after using the skill 2 times in a row to the next character in your roster. That means if she's placed at number 2, it'll jump to number 3. So you're probably going to want your DPS after her if you're going to be using this. And by doing so, it will grant all your party members the seize the moment state. Now, when your active party members' normal attacks, charge attacks, and plunging attacks hit a nearby opponent, Tomoto, the automaton doll, will execute a coordinated attack dealing 100% of the skill's upward sweep damage as AoE geo damage at the opponent's location. Remember that this is skill damage, so making sure to level this talent majorly, the first point is going to be the best thing for you, and then looking at the burst as the second thing. You don't really have to do too much into the normal attack unless you go with the tailoring effect that gives you a geo infusion, which is that normal attack after you use your skill. Also, while going back to using the skill 2 times in a row, seize the moment lasts for 8 whole seconds, and one of those Tomoto coordinated attacks can be unleashed every 2 seconds, and you can do 2 of those attacks every time that you get seize the moment. So keeping that in mind, that's just basically helping a lot more damage to come from off field for Chiori, and talking actually about some geo application for characters like Navia to actually be able to create the crystallize effect. Now, looking a little bit beyond her skill, her burst is a nice big hit of damage. It is using 2 of her blades that she has and using a big AoE geo hit that does go off for attack and defense once again. So, obviously, like normal, making sure that you go into attack and defense when looking at this character. Some of the other things that she can do, which is why you're kind of wanting to use her with another Geo character that can put up another Geo construct. Not only is she going to put up 2 of those dolls, which means more overall damage, but her other passive talent states that when a nearby party member creates a Geo construct, Chiori will gain a 20% Geo damage bonus for 20 seconds, which is really, really good considering that duration on her skills is 17 seconds long. So throwing this out there is extremely nice to have. All of these things being considered, I think that first and foremost, you're going to be wanting using your skill twice back to back, immediately switching to your DPS, that is probably a Geo character, and doing a bunch of attacks to make sure that she's getting as much damage out on field as possible with those coordinate attacks that she can do. So looking a little bit beyond this though, talking about some weapons and then going into some artifacts. Now, I am going to switch to a character that actually has a sword so that we can actually see, because Chiori uses a sword, some weapons that you could use. Her personal weapon is obviously going to be her best weapon, and obviously there are some great things to do with that. She already ascends into crit rate, and that is going to be extremely nice to help with a nice crit ratio while balancing the attack and crit damage that you will have with the defense and the attack, because she dual scales into both of those. If you also get some extra crit rate and crit damage out of this ascension with the crit rate and then going into crit damage actually with this weapon, that is actually going to be extremely helpful for you. With Uraku, you're really looking at a high amount of crit damage here at 88.2%, and while that is extremely nice to help with, once again, a balanced crit ratio, she does give herself a normal attack damage increase as well as an elemental skill damage increase, and it states that after a nearby active character deals geo damage, the aforementioned effects increase by 100% for 15 seconds, which means 16 on top of 16, so you'll have a 32% normal attack damage increase, and the elemental skill damage increase will now be 48%, a 24 on top of a 24. Additionally, the wielder's defense is increased by 20%. So all along these things, you're helping so much with her actual stats that it's just extremely useful to have. There are a lot of other 5 stars that you could use that wouldn't necessarily be terrible either. Primordial Jade Cutter is a great weapon just because it does give an attack buff off of some max HP, which you're not really getting a crazy amount of with Chiori, but it is a nice help, especially with the main stat of 44.1% crit rate at level 90. That's going to be kind of helpful for you with some extra attack buffs in there and looking for defense on your substats and your characters on your artifacts. But probably the next best weapon, you could even use something like a 3-star Harbinger of Dawn, using that at R5. Most people probably have a high, refinement of this weapon, so it could be pretty easy to get and use. I think that weapon, just because of its crit damage and crit rate increase, is going to be extremely helpful for you. Never mind using some other weapons like Cinnabar Spindle, which is also a great weapon to use. Honestly, just because it is a defense percent main stat and the elemental skill damage is increased by 40% of your defense. So if you're going heavily into defense and attack is kind of your secondary stat, that weapon's going to be extremely useful for you. You could use even other weapons like Wolfang if you really want to help with, once again, those elemental skill damage hits and even some crit rate on them. And you're getting crit rate main stat, so I think in general she can use a lot of different weapons, so she is pretty free to play friendly. But in terms of her teams, that's where it kind of changes. Going beyond this though, really looking at what you're going to want to be using for a 4-piece set of artifact sets, you're really going to look at probably a 4-piece Golden Troop set, just because Golden Troop is going to be increasing by so much skill damage. Now we saw in this kit actually, really there's a lot of elemental skill damage happening here. And so by constantly just increasing your amount of skill damage from the 2-piece and the 4-piece set, that's where you're really focusing on. So this effect can even happen off field. It is a little bit meant for some other characters, but Chiori can make some really good usage out of this. Another set that could be used is Husk of Opulent Dreams. Never mind does it give a great amount of defense percent in the 2-piece, but the 4-piece set isn't really that bad either. This states that while on the field, the character gains 1 stack after hitting an opponent with a Geo attack, so if she uses her normal attacks like we were talking about, with that infusion, she can get 1 of these stacks, and then when she's off field, if the character gains 1 stack every 3 seconds. Now she is going to be off field, and once again, if she's hitting something multiple times, she can get up to obviously all of these 4 stacks because she can hit 4 times with her skills off field in that 17-second duration that they have, because that'll be providing a 6% defense and a 6% geo damage bonus buff to her. Now you can gain all these stacks happening with her, and so 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams really isn't that bad. If you want to throw rather some 2-piece artifact sets, you could even throw in a 2-piece Archaic Petra, which gives some geo damage bonus, and obviously going back to 2-piece Golden True for the extra elemental skill damage, and the 2-piece Husk for the big jump in defense. But besides that, you're really going to want to focus on defense percent, probably on her Sands, going into a geo damage bonus goblet, and then a crit rate or crit damage circlet. Going a little bit beyond this into an idea with this character, I want to talk about 2 major teams that she's going to be useful on that I think she can really work with. Looking at this team, you're probably using Ito, Zhongli, Goro, and Chiori, or you can just kick out Goro and then throw in Chiori with a Bennett. Either way, though, you're focusing heavily on a mono geo team, and she does pretty well in this team because other characters in here can throw out geo constructs, which we saw how useful putting out those geo constructs were, so that she could obviously help get more damage selfishly. Now, alongside of this, she does a lot of great damage with this and helping the overall team damage. Alongside of that team, you could even throw her in something like this, kind of what I call the rock candy team or the crystallized team. Now, Navia needs a lot of geo application to help here, which is why usually her best supports for geo, because you want the elemental resonance for geo, which, yes, it increases shield strength, which is nice to keep those crystallize on you, but also characters protected by the shield will have certain characteristics. Their damage dealt will be increased by 15%, and dealing damage to enemies will decrease their geo resonance by 20% for 15 seconds. Obviously going to be extremely good for the geo type here, especially with how hard Navia hits. Getting that extra resistance shred is going to be extremely nice for her. But like I was talking about, her best supports probably for geo characters are going to be Albedo as well as Chiori. I'm using Yunjin just because it's another off-field kind of character I have. And so if you have someone like Zhongli, she's a great character as a buff too. But Chiori is a great character here because once again we saw, yes, she's a little selfish with personal damage, but she does a lot of extra geo application off-field. So you'll be able to constantly create those crystallized reactions for Navia to pick up, so she can do a lot more damage in her skill hits. Well, that's everything I've got for this video, talking about Chiori, how she works, kind of a build guide to an extent, and how some quick tips that you can work in the specific teams that she works in. If you guys have any questions, please go ahead and let me know down below, as well as please go ahead and like and subscribe, and thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.